Welcome back to another edition of Real Talk with Real People, a candid conversation with authors Karoline Bethea-Jones and Renee Marshall-McKinley. This is part 4 of our 5-part series, Writing with Friends, a candid conversation. So let's stick around and see what else we have to say. Thanks for listening.
It's so funny you should say that because that's absolutely true. This is the house that Karoline built.
Yes.
We
didn't talk about that, y'all. I just said that. It is so true.
And she's saying it, and I'm thinking about, but yes.
Yes.
Because I had a vision of what I wanted to do, and my family was just right there. And the encouragement that I got from them, plus me encouraging them that, hey, you can do this.
Absolutely.
Because Kiana was my choreographer, too, because she had took dance for all those long time. She choreographed all the dance scenes. She choreographed she was able to help me direct because she was able to choreograph because Women on the Edge was a play about monologues. It was a monologue-driven play. Yeah. It was similar to For Colored Girls Who Consider Suicide when the rainbow was enough,
when the
right?
Rainbow was enough. Yes.
And I loved that play.
Me too.
So it was similar to that.
Poster at home.
So it was I don't even know what you call it, but it was a series of monologues back to back. You know. So she helped me to scope that in a choreographic way. Yes. And it was brilliant.
It's amazing how we talked about earlier how the words and the visual meet.
Yes.
And I get that. So, you work well with your family and your family's creative. I have that same piece with Jocelyn in Bells in Bloom.
I was thinking about Bells in Bloom when I was thinking about even telling you about Women on the Edge and the way it was put on. I was thinking about Bells in Bloom in that same way.
Same way. I work well with my daughter. She's the photographer of Bells in Bloom. Actually, she is my left hand and my right hand when it comes to Bells in Bloom. She visualizes things. I'll tell her, here's a color, and she's like pulling. She does the clothing. We built that little flower thing. She like really, really puts it all together for me.
She did a phenomenal job with all of the when you just because today y'all they released the cover shot of our Bells in Bloom photo shoot for Purple Shades of Purple, and it was phenomenal. I'm looking at it like, okay, Jocelyn, I see you, girl.
It was so good.
I see you, and the way she positioned everybody, the way everybody,
great, right?
And she had a great eye. She's like, okay, no, I need to move this. I need to, and then you see the final project and you see how she in herself, she's an artist.
She is an artist. She is. She's a visual
and she's
artist.
A producer, and she's you know what I'm, and she's a director. She's all of those things.
All those things.
Yes.
But you know what's interesting? We sometimes
don't see
all those titles because we just do what we do. 1, because we love it. 2, because we have a calling on it. 3, because it's fun. But when you move all that out the way, she is a producer.
Yes.
She is a stylist.
And she's a director.
A director.
Yes.
All those things.
She's all of those
things.
She's
a makeup artist because she did my makeup.
She's a makeup artist. She's all of those things. And we don't think about being all those things.
We don't.
Because like I said, it wasn't until Women on the Edge that I realized, okay, you're going to have to be all these things.
You are. Yes.
And then from that on, when we did, The Heart of a Different Color, and we did... Redemption. And we did Shepherding a Woman's Heart. And we did all of these things. And it was like all of these things it just started to fit. I never asked anybody to help me again. It was like, this is what we're going to do. I had my whole family here. And we were all working together.
Because,
now Isaiah, he's old enough now to be a part of our productions. He's doing photography. He's helping with the videos. He's
never think.
It's like I'm not asking nobody outside of my family to help me.
That's right. Unless we have to.
We
start there first.
Okay?
We start there first.
Exactly.
But wow, we do create or move into those spaces, those positions.
Absolutely.
Out of necessity, right? What is it? Necessity is the mother of all inventions, right?
It is.
And it's the truth.
It is.
It is absolutely the truth. This is a good conversation.
And we can segue into poetry. And the reason we can segue into poetry is because Women on the Edge was a monologue driven, but also poetry driven. And when I think about Bells and Blooms, because, I don't want you to see how this is separated. Yeah. Because when I think about Bells and Bloom, I see the poetry of it. I see the poetry of these women coming together. And the way, I see poetry in motion.
Yes,
I love that. Every single one of our single photo shoots, as well as the group photo shoot, was poetry in motion. So all of this, although it seemingly seems like this is so unrelated, it is not unrelated.
It's not.
It is not unrelated.
And that takes me also to pouring, because when I asked the girls to give me their chapters, I said, "Hey, do we have any poets in the group?" And all of them said, "Oh, I don't write." But they wrote some poetry. Exactly. Even myself. I was like, what is that?
Exactly. And people there's so many different forms of poetry.
Yes. Because I'm not a sing-songy, rhyme-rhymey.
Right. There are so many different parts of poetry.
Yes.
You have people say, "Oh, I write poetry." But then you sit down and write. I wrote something not that long ago because I also was thinking, this ain't poetry, but I'm just going to write this.
Yeah.
And then I submitted it to somebody, and they were like, "Okay, I want you to recite this poem." I'm like, "But that's not a poem." And he looked at me like, "Excuse me?"
Yeah.
He goes, "This is a poem." And I'm like, "Okay, I didn't write it as a poem." He goes, "This is poetry." So sometimes we don't even understand what poetry is. It's not just my hat is yellow today. Let's go out and play.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
It's not about, that's why I said it's not Dr. Seuss.
It's not Dr. Seuss.
Oh my goodness.
It is a lot of interweaving and moving
it's your
things.
Emotions.
It's emotions on paper.
Yes.
And it's so good to know that, this right here, it may not suit right. I don't like being in a box, first of all.
No boxes.
I don't like writing in a box. I like for my emotions to be as raw as this conversation is right now.
Yeah.
And I want to write about what I'm feeling. I remember, and I don't know if you remember this incident, I don't even know what year it was, but there was a shooting of a young black man and a boy. He was a teenager in Teaneck.
Okay.
Philip Pennell was his name.
Okay.
And I remember I was young during that time, not young like a teenager, but young enough to feel a kind of rage.
Yeah.
And this was before all of the killing of black men that we have now. Mm-hmm. And I remember, because I couldn't really speak it in a way that people can understand, I'm upset by this.
Yes.
But I sat down and I wrote a poem. I wrote about it in poem form. I still have it today. Because it bothered me so much. There was things I wanted to say.
Yes.
And I said it in a poem form. I wrote poetry for my mom. I wrote poetry for my children, for my son. We talked about country music earlier, right? I wrote a poem for my son when he was born. It was called "He's My Son." He's my child. He's my child. And I wrote it, and I submitted it to the country music, whatever, and they literally put music to it. Now,
no way.
No, not lying. That was my first country song.
Wow.
And it was derived from a poem I wrote the poem for AJ called "He's My Son." And I couldn't believe that they wrote music to it.
I love this so much.
And they sung it. They wrote music to it and sang it. Al's like, "Oh my God, that's a corny song." I'm like, "How you gonna say my song is corny?" Right?
I love this concept so much.
It was so beautiful. And I would have never, and I was young. That's when I was first starting out. I would have never put that poem to a song. But they sent it back to me, and a country woman was singing it. I was like, "Oh my God." I saw, okay, Beyonce, I got a country song too. Okay.
But what's interesting? So so I wrote the book. Mm-hmm. I wrote a little bit of poetry in the book. There was a poetry event in Montclair at the Eclectic Chic Boutique. Shout out, Kristen.
Okay.
And they were looking for poets. She knew about my book. She said, "Renee, can you come and read one of the poems out your book?" I said, that's not like poem-y. It's in my head.
In your head.
That's not poem-y. That's not poem-y enough. And she said, "Girl, get up here and read one of your poems."
And I bet you got your little snaps.
I did.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it's just amazing how you don't really see.
You cannot sometimes see.
See.
But you got to always be able to, I'm going to use your word right now. You got to be ready to pour into yourself and into the world.
As soon as she
I
said,
am
I said,
always ready to pour into someone.
Wow. Yeah.
And my words, I've read several books. I have several memoir type books. I have How to Hold On, My Personal Journey. It was during a dark time in my life where I needed my Christianity to get me through it.
Lord, we need you now.
And I wrote about it in a little manual book called How to Hold On, My Personal Journey.
Wow, okay.
So it was like it wasn't me trying to tell people what to do.
No, absolutely.
It was me
releasing
yes. and explaining how I was able to hold on. How I was able to hold on.
See, that's a self-help book right there.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
If anything that I'm saying in that book can help you hold on, then it's good.
Yes.
But I was telling you, and this is how I am as a creative person. I need my stuff to be out here. I need for it to land somewhere.
Yes.
Now, I read that book right now. If I read that book right now, sometimes, because that book was written, I'm talking years ago, it was during a very dark time in my life when I was really going through it and didn't know if I was going to make it. And again, this is a candid conversation.
Sure, absolutely.
So it was during a time when I honestly thought that my being here wouldn't have mattered to anyone. So I literally needed to put that somewhere. Right. And I wanted to write it, and I wanted to put it out there in case there was somebody else who may have at any time, whether it's now, whether it's then, or whether it's 20 years in the future, that someone who was feeling that darkness, but someone who was also very dependent on their spirituality. And my Christianity was very important to me. It was the reason why I didn't do a lot of things, because it was like I was torn by my beliefs and the things that I needed to be, and it was hard, and I needed to talk about that. But when I read that book right now, I cringe and I'm like, oh my God, I hate that I was there. But I'm glad that I was able to also be able to
that's right, because you were there
to document that, because it shows my growth now.
Absolutely,
and if I had not have documented that in a place where I can go pull that book out right now and read and go, oh dear Lord, thank you Jesus. Now I ain't there no more.
See, that's because that's a testimony right there.
It is a testimony. So I'm not ashamed of any of my writings, and some of my writings are dark. Because I was in a dark place, but I wanted to. Here's the thing I always want to do. You'll hear me talk about legacy work a lot, Renee.
I was getting ready to say that word, but I didn't get there yet. Yes.
Because we have talked about legacy work.
Yes.
So everything that I've gone through in my life, everything that I've written, everything that, even all my songs, I produced last year. Al produced for me a song. We'll talk about that later. Yes. But I wanted to have a legacy.
I love it.
Who's going to tell your story when you leave this world?
Because that little bit of obituary, that ain't gonna get it.
There's a line in Hamilton that goes, "Who lives, who dies, who tells your story?"
Come on, Eliza.
Right. Who tells your story? And I told Al that soundtrack, that music, it touched me. Like, who's gonna tell my story?
Oh my God, you guys, you don't understand. Caroline and I are so connected.
Yes, we are.
That Hamilton soundtrack is in this phone because I play this soundtrack every day that I drive.
I love it. Every day. It's on my thing too.
I would have never thought that I would be a Hamilton lover, a lover of history.
Yes.
That just changed for me.
Exactly.
Those songs in there, and those are sing-songy, right? Because some of them rhyme. Those are poems that rhyme. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh my God, this touches my heart. But getting back to legacy, all the things we do, all the writing we've done, this podcast right now, the things we work with our children and our family with.
That's right.
That's all toward our legacy.
It's all toward our legacy. When I leave this world, you heard me just say, my granddaughter's 4 years old.
Yes.
She didn't know me 20 years ago.
Right.
She didn't know me 30 years ago.
Yes.
She didn't know when I was struggling through darkness. Right. Now, other people may forget all of this, but I didn't want to forget it.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be part of my legacy.
Yeah.
I want my granddaughter to read about those struggles. Yeah. I want my granddaughter to see me as I was, where I were, mm-hmm. and where I am, and all the things that I'm leaving her.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's important. I know nothing about my mother, really.
Yeah.
You know, she would say little things or whatever, but it's like, you know, I found out that my mother played piano when, you know, like...
Really?
Like 10, 15 years ago. She, you know, just very casually say, "Oh, I used to play piano." And I'm like, "Wait, what?" You know? I'm like, "What?"
Yes.
And then she said she was good at it, apparently. And then I would talk to her. Then it sparked me to go talk to my uncles and my aunts. Yes. I'm like, "My mother used to play the piano."
Because they could tell you, you know.
Right. And they'd be like, "Oh, did she? Nora was good at it." You know what I'm saying? Wow. She played it. She was, and I'm like, "See, this is something I ain't even know." You know, I ain't even know.
You know what's interesting about legacy? So on my paternal side, there's books written about my great grandfather. So I never met him. He died when my father was just born, like maybe 4 months. My father might have been 4 months old. So my father didn't know him, and he never talked about him.
Okay.
Ever. So as I got older and my father had passed, I wanted to dig into my father's side of the family. Now, there's buildings and streets that are named after my great-grandfather. But because my father didn't really know him, he never told me about the legacy that we had. We're from Panama City, Florida, and there's like buildings and streets and people have written books about my great-grandfather. Mm-hmm. People wrote books about my great-grandfather? Like, what is that? My great-grandfather, he was a free man. Mm-hmm. Never a slave, praise God. He was freed and he was a pioneer. He started, he built a housing and a church and a school. We didn't have, of course they didn't have that back then when he was a young man. So they built all those things. He was a boat builder and I would have never known that if people had not thought it was important to document that. Now, of course, it wasn't black people who wrote about my great-grandfather because we ain't had that kind of power back then.
Right.
White people wrote about my great-grandfather because, one, it was a necessity. They needed what he had, the skills that he had. He was a fisherman, a hunter, and he knew the terrain. He was in the military, on both sides of the military. So I would have never known that from my father because he didn't know it.
Okay.
His children that was our father going through a hard time when they were growing up.
Exactly.
So it was not like a rock star thing for them. When I started learning this, I was like, my great-grandfather was a rock star. Yeah. But we have legacy in the books that the people wrote. Right. So I started doing research. Thank God for Ancestry DNA. I started doing research because they had newsletters and newspapers that they were pulling things together.
Right.
So I was pulling all that information down, sharing it with my cousins and my aunts that are still living. And out of that, my one cousin wrote a book about our great-grandfather. And that's still legacy. One, that I helped in the research of that, but two, that my cousin wrote about it, and that there's other books out there that my kids can write and read about it. My grandson wrote a book, an essay in one about writing about his that's my great-grandfather. Writing about his great-great-grandfather. Mm-hmm. Because somebody wrote about it.
Yeah.
Somebody
legacy is important. And I'm glad you said that whole entire thing. That
was like a monologue, y'all.
No. And I love that you did. I was just sitting and telling Al a few days ago that I want to write about my father. And the reason why my father and my father does not get the credit my father should have gotten. And it's difficult. And I said, I didn't even really understand my father until I started thinking about him after he passed, right?
Same.
Right. But, I don't know. My father was, do you remember the paper, the Bergen Evening Record?
Bergen? So that's in Bergen County?
It's a Bergen County. So
okay, no.
The Bergen Evening Record was in Hackensack on River Street. And it was a very prominent paper in Bergen County.
Yeah.
My father was the first African American pressman to work there.
Wow.
And he was phenomenal. No one talks about my father, or talk about how he opened doors, or talked about what he went through as a black man during that time.
Yeah.
In that particular, in the 60s, and in that time,
Yeah.
having to endure what he had to endure.
Yes.
Staying there for 25 years, doing his job and doing it well.
Of course, with excellence.
To the point in which when he retired, they called him back to train.
Wow. Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
And I'm always looking for stories. I'm like, why are there no stories of my father being the first black, first African American, first black pressman of the Bergen Evening Record?
That's the story you need to write.
A very prominent newspaper in Bergen County.
That you need.
Why don't nobody know about my father, John M. Bethea? Why don't they know that he was the first? Why is no one talking about how he opened up doors? Why is my father's name not mentioned side by side with that newspaper, Bergen Evening Record?
Because first, my great-grandfather was first in so many of these things.
That's what I'm trying to say. And because there's never really no records of us when it comes to the achievements. You find the ones that you find, but then you forget about all the little unassuming ones. You forget about all the little people who paved the way for all the other people.
That's why I said, oh my God, when I just start doing this research and finding things and I ordered every single book that everybody ever wrote about my great-grandfather. There's this one book called Glimpses. My father died. My aunt Brenda lived up here in New Jersey, and she just said, "Oh, there was a book written about us about my grandfather."
Very casually spoken.
After my father died, I said, "What?" She said, "Oh yeah, there was a book written about her mother for her grandfather." I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Yeah, something about glimpses." That's all she had to tell me. Something about glimpses. I'm on that thing, this computer.
That's
I'm on this computer. I purchased the last book available in print of that Glimpses copy.
Okay.
The last book. That book was written in 66 or 65. The person who wrote that book, he signed it, but he signed it to somebody else. I paid a pretty penny for that book. Now everybody in my family goes, I want that book.
Well, you can't get it now
You
because
will
it's out
never
of print.
touch
Okay.
one. It's out of print. But this book that's in my hand,
you will never have it.
nobody will ever touch it.
Yeah. I'm so glad legacy is one of the topics that we stumbled upon to talk about.
Because this wasn't on our list,
right? It was not on the list.
Yes.
Legacy was not on this list that I'm looking at to make sure that we are going through everything. And I'm saying, yeah, we are.
Yes.
Legacy was not on this list, but legacy is so important.
It's so important.
And so important to me. It's so important to me that I leave my story.
Yes.
I want to tell my story.
Yes.
I don't want somebody piecing together what Karoline's life was about because nobody really knows me.
No.
And even now when I tell you how I had this unassuming life, I live in a world that really they know
I would never guess that either.
They know of me.
Yes.
But they don't know me because no one has ever really taken the time to really get to know me.
Yeah.
You know, maybe no fault of their own. Maybe it's because of me, because I'm such a close-knit person.
Yeah.
I stay so closely knitted to my family that I don't need outside stimuli. Right. So maybe I'm the reason why people don't know me.
Yeah.
Okay? I'm going to just throw that out there.
Yes, I get it.
But no one can tell my story.
Not at all.
And I need to leave these pieces of my story behind so that my granddaughter can have an accurate understanding of who I was. Because again, like I said, when I'm gone from this world, she might only just be starting to be a young adult.
Yes, yeah.
She's not going to know who I am. Yeah. People are going to say, "Oh, I know your grandmother. I know," but they don't know me. I'm going to say it on the airways right now. You don't know me. Yeah. Because no one has ever taken the time to really get to know me. I won't say no one. I got like 3 truly best friends.
Yes. Yeah.
Who really know me inside and out, right? And then the rest of them are friends. You're my friend.
Yes.
But you just said on many occasions, but a couple of occasions on this podcast, I didn't even know that about her. I didn't know that about her, right?
And guys, I've known Karoline for years.
You've known me for years.
And it's not like we standoffish friends.
We're not standoffish friends. We're real friends.
Right. It's just that it never came up.
Right.
We talk. We go out to eat. We go to plays together. But we do stuff.
Exactly.
But
exactly. But there's so much. And to her credit, there is lots that I don't know about you.
Absolutely.
I don't know a lot about you.
That's right. And that's the thing, right? So no one's never going to really know somebody 100%, especially if you're not like in that immediate circle. Now I'm in a circle, but I'm not in that immediate circle. And I'm okay because look, Caroline, my girl, look, we go back, we do stuff. And I'm okay with that. But even my besties, we always hold stuff back. Yeah. Right? Nobody's ever going to be 100%. Our spouses, they're not going to be 100% knowing everything about us. And rightfully so. Nobody's supposed to know 100% of you. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Because you got to keep some stuff for yourself.
I mean, we do.
My husband said to me, Renee, I didn't know you. It's something I had did or someplace I ate at. But I didn't say, oh, I'm going to eat here. Because I was just out and I decided to eat there. So you're not going to give an account one by one what you do. So nobody's going to ever know fully all the things that you've done. Even if we write a book about ourselves, autobiographical.
We're not going to write about it.
You're not going to write. There's just no way. It's just, the book will be huge.
There are going to be some things that other people remember about you that you don't even remember about you.
It happens to me all the time. My girlfriend will say, oh, remember we did this? You had on this. I did.
My
children.
I don't remember.
I remember we went. We did. Because God is that way. He gives us memories. Some we keep. Some we live through. And some we just put to pasture. Because we got new things coming in. New experiences coming in. We just can't remember it all. But segueing back to legacy.
Thank you for listening to part 4 of Authors Speak with Karoline Bethea-Jones and Renee Marshall-McKinley. Thank you for listening. We'll see you back next time for our final part 5.